Alright, baby! It's time to talk about another superhero movie this time. It's Ant-Man and the Wasp. Which, I guess just jumping right into opinion territory has kind of... The popular opinion on this movie seems to be about the same as I would expect, and going based on the last movie. People... I don't want to call this movie divisive, because it's not. People are generally on the same wavelength. Some people say it's not good, some people say it's good, but they all seem to be in the same general area of it was okay, nothing great. And I don't know if we're gonna deviate from that opinion too much. I don't know if you want to give your opening thoughts first, or you want me to jump in?
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it, man.
Well, I think I'm on the more positive side with this one. I think maybe I like it slightly better than the first Ant-Man, which is kind of like Thor Ragnarok, and that's a movie that a lot of people really love, and I'm not super into it. I enjoy it, but I think I got a little bit more out of this one. If I'm just gonna jump into non-spoilers kind of pros and cons, I think the main cons are the same as last movie, and that's that Peyton Reed's visual direction is really uninspired at points. There are one or two scenes where it's really cool, and when he's playing with the size stuff especially, but for the most part, I want to say 80% of this movie, it's shot really pedestrian, and that can kind of take you out of it. These are definitely, I think the Ant-Man movies, when they're not, experimenting with the size stuff, are the least interesting looking of all the MCU movies. This doesn't really change that. And Scott is kind of the least compelling of the main MCU protagonists, and that's nothing to do with Paul Rudd. He's great, but the first movie, I think, kind of tried to give him an arc that didn't entirely, solidify, and he's not the most compelling guy. I think this movie tried to compensate by giving him more of an arc. We can get into that later and how I don't think that necessarily lands perfectly. But there's a lot to this movie that I really enjoyed, which we'll get into as we talk about it. But for the most part, I'm glad I saw it in theaters. I'm probably gonna see it in theaters again. But it's not something that I don't know. It's difficult. How do I put this? I'm glad I saw this in theaters, and not just because I'm sort of an MCU completionist who's seen all of these movies in theaters. I want to say from the Avengers onward, I haven't missed one in theaters. But, if you're not... If you didn't love the first Ant-Man, you can kind of maybe wait to see this on TV or on DVD.
All right. Well, I didn't like the movie. Well, I liked the movie. I did like the movie. I enjoyed it. But this is not... I kind of wish I did not see it in theaters, and this is a movie that I definitely could have waited for it to hit on VOD or DVD, and I probably won't feel the need to ever go back to it again.
That's understandable.
I think it's perfectly fine to have a really fun, disposable movie. I wasn't really expecting it to be anything more than that. I think it's... I don't know if it's any better of a story than the first Ant-Man, but I would say I don't agree with you with the direction at all. I think this movie's directed perfectly fine. I think the action is even more creative and more well handled than the first movie. The humor I'm really mixed on. A lot of it really works. Some of it kind of doesn't. And at the end of the day, I feel like, I don't know, maybe there was a little too much of that. The villain is perfectly fine, serviceable. Nothing super interesting or special about her. She's really cool aesthetically. I like the shifting effect. I think the costume is really cool.
Yeah, the costume is great.
But this isn't a character that I'm going to remember
Okay, so I guess just hitting those things, I guess, sort of in order. I don't think there's anything wrong with Peyton Reed's direction. Like you said, it's serviceable, but like, especially through Phase 3, I've kind of gotten used to these movies being a little bit more than serviceable. And this kind of feels like something I could see on TV versus like Infinity War, or Guardians Volume 2, or Thor Ragnarok. And that's not anything in the way of like the effects or how good it looks necessarily. It's just kind of the composition and the way things are blocked and stuff. It's weird. It's very complicated and hard to get into for me as someone who is not a visual direction person. Like, I don't know how to properly articulate that. But in terms of the action, I actually find it interesting how there's less action in this movie in comparison to the first one. And a big part where the direction kind of started to take me out of it and bug me especially was the climax, where I feel like the beginning of the climax and the end of the climax are kind of just really boring and not the best action. And the middle, like the whole chase part, where everyone's sort of chasing each other for the building, that's where I'm getting really into it, and that's where I feel like most of the creative stuff happens. But there's not actually many action scenes in this movie, and I don't mind that. Like, that part of what I actually really like about this movie, which is just the scale of the story, and like how you said, it's kind of disposable, but I really appreciate that in the way that we've got a lot of movies. Most of Phase 3, I want to say, has been like either a country is at stake, or the world is at stake, or people think the world is at stake and it isn't. Or, as we saw with Infinity War, the entire universe is at stake and dies. And this movie is just about saving the life of one person. And that, I think, is a really... like, that adds a sense of variety that these movies need. And so I appreciate that and how small it is. But I think that doesn't necessarily preclude it being more interesting visually, outside of some token moments, like I said. And about the villain, I actually really like Ghost, because people seem kind of torn on her. I think she's like the aspect of the movie people are most divided over, where some people think she's really great, and some people think she's straight up terrible, and the worst villain these movies have had in a while. And some people think she's okay. I am on okay, leaning towards, like, pretty good. I think I expected to go into this movie find her really disappointing. But I disagree. I think I'm gonna remember her mainly because of where we end with her. I think that's super interesting, and we can get into that later as we talk about, like, the ending and stuff. But I don't know, there's a lot to this character. I don't think it's necessarily all there on the page, but Hannah John Kamen gives a great performance. Like, I think so much of why I'm gonna her is just her acting. And yeah, I don't know, I was really, like, invested in her character. She was really fun for me.
I mean, I don't see how you could see all that much in her. She's literally just trying to keep herself alive. And that's kind of all there is to her character.
Yeah, that's a simple motivation, but, like, the fact that she's constantly in pain, and I think the performance, the acting really conveys that every time you see her face. And, like, she seems kind of, like, eerie, like, even outside of the whole face-shifting thing, just her body language and the way that she looks at people is kind of scary, but not in, like, a forced way. It's like oh, this person's just kind of accidentally creepy, and I find that weirdly, like, alluring or captivating, I guess is a better word. It's like, I don't know, you're right in that her motivation is really simple, but I don't know, I found her really interesting. And, like, I want to see more of her. Spoiler, she doesn't die, so, like, already weren't spoilers. The way we end the movie with her is like she's kind of on the good guy's side now, and her problem has been fixed. Or, well, at least we have a temporary sort of fix if we keep giving her these particles. So I'm really curious, like, is she gonna pop up again? Is she gonna be, like, helping the heroes next time she shows up? I don't know. I think there's a lot to look forward to with this character.
I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Um, this movie is the very next thing that we got after Infinity War. Um, a lot of people look at it as a great, palate cleanser. A lot of other people look at it as, well, this is just kind of lame and anticlimactic because we just got this big, epic, grand movie. But what do you think Marvel's thought process was in putting this out? Essentially, the story itself essentially takes place, you could say, either during or right before Infinity War.
Yeah.
And so, what's the rationale behind putting this movie after that movie comes out? Because, like, the only thing connecting this movie to that one is the mid-credit scene.
Yeah, and you don't want that mid-credit scene to come. You don't want people to see that before Infinity War, so that makes sense. And also, I don't know, I could get into, like, maybe they thought that they needed that release date for Infinity War to make more, if I wanted to get into, like, the behind-the-scenes stuff. I don't know, there's probably, like, 101 factors going into why each movie comes out when it does, when they decide to put it on the schedule, I'm not sure. But I don't know, it's probably is what everyone kind of says it is, which is that they knew that coming off of Infinity War, people were going to be really tense, and so they just wanted Ant-Man to be kind of a breather. And, the first Ant-Man came after Age of Ultron, which is not as... Like, no one leaves Age of Ultron feeling the way that they did leaving Infinity War,
No.
in terms of just what in that movie. But,
Especially
that is kind of...
in a weird way, Infinity War ended up being what Age of Ultron was kind of advertised as, but not really.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Age of Ultron is a very fun movie with a lot of jokes and fun dialogue, but it is still kind of a dark story where there's, like, our characters go through kind of a harrowing, dark situation, and there's a lot of kind of existential themes that if you think about it too hard will really ruin your day. And so Ant-Man comes in, it's just this light, fluffy, like, heist movie. And so I feel like, especially since it's sandwiched between that and Civil War, I think people decided, like, you need the buffer. Like, you can't just jump from Age of Ultron to Civil War, you kind of need something to tide you over between those two. And maybe this will make more sense when Captain Marvel comes out and we see how that movie feels. Like, if that's another kind of dark, maybe a little bit tense and depressing movie like Infinity War was, it'd make more sense even to have Ant-Man and the Wasp sandwiched between those. But now I really do think it is just, they wanted to sort of, just give audiences a little breather. Like, you'll do in comics sometimes, like, one comic line, like,
what? You
like
broke up there.
These movies. Oh, sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, like, if we're comparing these movies to comic lines, like, the latest issue of Avengers was really heavy. Maybe I want a breather, let me just pick up this issue of Ant-Man by a different writer. It's more fun. So I think that's kind of what they're going for with the movies, where you jump from movie to movie and it's a different character, it's a different property. So it doesn't have to necessarily keep the same, like, feel as the last movie that came out, because that was its own thing.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't agree with the people who have those issues with Ant-Man just because we got something vastly different before it.
I don't think that's most people.
Well, no, maybe not most. Just like a fairly loud fraction of people. But I also did appreciate how small scale it was. I don't know. I just found this to be kind of average. As much as the movie was trying to get me like emotionally invested in all the Hope stuff. I wasn't really all that much. I don't know. Maybe it's just that maybe it's just that the mother like wasn't in the movie, and like we don't have we see her mother really briefly in the first movie, and she's in costume. We don't even know what she looks like or anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like they a job as they could have with the story they were telling to try to get me invested in her mother and like then bring her back and everything. I'm glad they didn't like give us like a full flashback. I mean, they did give us one, but like we didn't spend too much time in flashback territory, which I appreciated. But I don't know. I just wasn't invested in that stuff as the movie wanted me to be. I was really invested in Paul Rudd's his situation with his daughter and like him trying to be there for her, but at the same time getting pulled back into this superhero stuff that doesn't line up with the law, and that could jeopardize him getting to see his daughter and all that kind of stuff. Like I was invested in that.
Yeah, and I suppose that really is what's going to dictate like how much you enjoyed the movie in general, because like the stuff with Janet, Hope's mom, is really the central tension of the whole movie. So like I said, the whole thing revolves around saving her life, and that's really the main source of tension. It's saving Janet, and it's getting Scott back in time to like get done with his house arrest. And like, you know, they say Scott's gonna be put away for like 20 years or more if he isn't there when the guys check on him and stuff. But that is played so much for laughs that it's almost a side thing compared to the real main thing, which is that Hope's mom and Hank's wife is on the verge of being lost forever for 100 years, she says, is like the next opportunity she's gonna have to like phase back into outside of the quantum realm. And so that's a way bigger stakes, just objectively, than Scott maybe going to jail for 20 years. And the movie kind of treats it appropriately, where the Janet stuff gets all the pathos, and the Scott stuff gets a little bit of it, but it's mainly humor, and it's mainly like Wu, played by Randall Park, being a goofball. And yeah, so if you don't have that investment in like Hope getting her mom back, then that's a lot of the movie just kind of not connecting with you, I guess.
And a fair bit of that is the actress. I don't think she's bad, but huh?
Michelle Pfeiffer?
No, not Michelle Pfeiffer. Evangeline Lilly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she came off like this is gonna sound in poor taste, but kind of obnoxiously feminist in interviews, and I guess I made the mistake of watching a little too much of that before I saw the movie, and so that already put a bad taste in my mouth with her. And as I'm watching the movie, she just comes across as so like two for school and I got this. And what was annoying about that was, you know, the movie's called Ant-Man and the Wasp. You would want them to be, you know, equals. And like we see Scott handling his powers pretty well in Civil War, and then we get to this movie and he feels more incompetent, and she's the only one that can competently beat people up. Well, not.
Do you agree with that?
Huh?
Because I don't agree with that, and this is like separate from the fact that I didn't watch those interviews wisely and also lazily. But yeah, I'll get into how I feel about Hobbes as a character in a bit. But in terms of Scott being incompetent, I don't think that comes through. And I think the only reason it feels like that is because he's got a buggy suit for the whole movie. which doesn't entirely make sense because he gets his old, better working suit around the middle of the movie and then they just don't use it. But, yeah, all of Scott's, like, not being able to do things as well as Hope comes down to his suit doesn't work properly.
And that's just really contrived and doesn't make sense.
It's there for gags, you know. It's supposed to be funny, so...
Yeah, it's supposed to be funny, you're not supposed to think about it. Which, again, is another issue that people are starting to have with the Marvel movies. It's becoming more and more of an actual issue, and not just people not looking at the movies at face value, if you know what I mean. Or it's like, we are getting really self-indulgent with the humor at the expense of character and story.
I don't want to say getting, because that implies that it's been, like, an upward trend, as if we didn't just come off Infinity War and Black Panther, which were both really restrained with that. And this, I actually think, ironically, because the sort of thing you're talking about is like the bathos that people will complain about, where we'll undercut the more serious moments with a big joke. And ironically, I think that only happens once in this movie, with the phone call that he gets from Cassie while Bill Foster's giving a speech. He's giving this big dramatic speech and he keeps getting interrupted by this silly ringtone. And that's a moment where I'm like, okay, get it out. It's just, we're undercutting a dramatic moment with a joke. And then they don't really do that again. Like all of the straightforward drama moments after that are allowed to just kind of play out.
That's very true. I will say, oddly enough, I think this is like one of Paul Rudd's like, well, one of his best moments in the movie is when Hope's mother is like talking through him.
Yeah, that's great.
It really felt like you were looking at someone else in Paul Rudd's body, and it was funny, but at the same time, like heartwarming and weird.
Yeah. It's like it's a really funny scene, but it's also like, oh man, I feel this. It's a genuine connection.
Yeah, and that connected to me more than once we finally see Hope and her mother together and like hugging and crying.
That's fair. Like, I don't have the thing that you have with Evangeline Lilly's performance. And again, I don't think it's necessarily because I didn't watch the interviews, but just in the last movie, she's very uptight and restrained, and a lot of that is her kind of being bitter towards her dad. And now that they've worked all that stuff out and have been on good terms for a little while, they both get to be way more vibrant and kind of fun to watch characters. And so I really enjoyed both Hank and Hope more in this movie than I did last time. That's
fair. What I like the theme. I think the theme really works.
Yes, Christoph Beck is back, and his score, I think, is better than the first movie. And I like that we gave Hope a separate theme from Scott, where it's like they really are partners, and they're not just sort of like cribbing his musical motif to use for her.
Yeah. Both their costumes look cool. The post-credit scene is exactly what I kind of wish that we just didn't do like a post-credit scene, especially because we already saw. Well, I say that, but Spider-Man: Homecoming did the same thing. I don't know, for whatever reason, that didn't come off irritating, just because like it builds on a gag that you saw earlier in the movie, but it's not the exact same gag with Captain America doing the commercial thing, the propaganda thing.
Yeah.
In this movie, it's just that big ant playing on the drums, and we literally just saw that exact thing in the movie.
And also in the trailers, which brings me to, like, I think one of this movie's biggest weaknesses that isn't actually its own fault is the way it was marketed. Because so much of this movie is in the trailers. And the way that the trailers are kind of structured, I suppose you could argue this is a good thing, but it really... Like, the way that I thought this movie was gonna play out is not... Like, action bits in the trailer that I assumed were gonna be, like, first act, second act stuff. Most of it is from the climax, and that's really weird to me.
Well, I guess, like, for the trailer, you want to show off the stuff that looks the coolest.
Yeah, and like I said, there's not too much action in this movie, so it makes sense that they would have to pull from kind of the one big extended action sequence. And that is kind of another way it's similar to the first one, where that's not a very action-driven movie until we get into the third act, where the whole third act is pretty much one long climax. Like, I think it's weird that, I'm kind of trying to remember, because outside of the Ant-Man movies and the Avengers movies, I don't think we do this thing too often, where it's like the third act starts, and then it's just action, action, action up until the climax is done. I think most of the other of these movies kind of have a few minutes in the third act where it builds to the action, and it's a bit more talky.
Oh, yeah, none of the other MCU movies, and even this one, has the Man of Steel problem, where the majority of that movie is painfully boring, and then they just throw all this action in your face for almost a half hour.
Yeah, although I don't know if it's so much of a problem here. Like, it is maybe a similarity, but, like, I don't see the fact that there's not as much action as usual in this movie as an issue. Like, I'm fine just kind of having it be more of, like, an intrigue thing or, like, a chase thing. Like, it's not like there's no tension. They're always after something or trying to get something or other, so there's still, like, a sense of propulsion, like we're moving forward and getting things done, even if it's not fighting between characters. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I was just saying that, the Marvel movies haven't really had that problem.
Yeah. And it's just, I want to be careful about phrasing it as a problem, because it's like,
I think, like, when I say problem, I just mean, like, the one big movie I can think of that does that, and that's Man of Steel.
Nah, that's fair. But I don't know, I think maybe you could argue also the first Ant-Man, because a lot of that movie is stealing things and prepping for this big heist, and the only real, like, hand-to-hand fight is the whole, like, 15-minute climax. Well, and also the Falcon bit. The Falcon bit is sort of like there because we need an action scene.
I have another question for you. Do you think we need a third Ant-Man movie?
Maybe. Just because the way that these movies sort of go is that I could totally stand for a third Ant-Man movie, but also I could totally stand to not get a third Ant-Man movie and just have all of the stuff that I want more of after this movie in someone else's movie. Like, we know Scott's going to be in Avengers 4, and also, I don't know if you know this, but we know Cassie is going to play a role of some kind in Avengers 4. So I'm like,
I
yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, depending on how Avengers 4 goes, I might be more eager to see another Ant-Man movie, but out of this one, I really don't need a third one.
Yeah, but it's like, it's the same way I kind of don't need direct sequels to anything else now that I think about it. Like, there's some instances where it only makes sense. Like, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Like, the way that we set up stuff that we're gonna do in that movie, it kind of has to be just the Guardians thing if it's going to continue on from Volume 2. But, like, I don't need an Iron Man or no matter how much I loved Iron Man 3, because we've just sort of been building Iron Man's character in other people's movies. And I don't necessarily need an Ant-Man 3 if I'm gonna get more Ant-Man and Wasp in other people's movies, still furthering those characters. So like I said, I wanted more Ghost. Like, Ghost could show up in someone else's movie and be an interesting, like, part of that. Like, I don't know, like, just randomly have Ghost show up in a Spider-Man movie. Why not? Like, the way we've gotten to a point with the MCU where we can just toss anyone in anywhere, and I'll be fine with that as, like, their quote-unquote movie.
Oh, with Iron Man, in Infinity War, we don't really get much of an arc for really anybody outside of Thor and Thanos. And like, Iron Man loses a lot of people at the end of that movie. Arguably most impactful is Peter, just because that's the one that happens like right in front of him, and he's become like this mentor / father figure, and they have a rapport.
Yeah.
And I think we have told that story of progression for Iron Man throughout the course of these movies, and it would make all the sense in the world for his story to end, whether he, actually dies or takes off the suit permanently by the end of Avengers 4. We'll see. But going back to Ant-Man and the Wasp. It was fine. I did have a good time in the theater. I enjoyed it. Just not really a whole lot for me to latch onto to make this super memorable or super rewatchable.
Yeah. Also, because I forgot to mention this as we were talking about the marketing, I think it was a mistake to have Janet or Michelle Pfeiffer be on all the posters and to make her part of the press tour, where she's clearly having trouble in interviews, like, articulating things about Janet as a character, and it's like, I don't understand why we have to parade her around like that. And like, we introduced her at the Comic-Con panel where this movie was first shown off. It's like, I understand you've got Michelle Pfeiffer's a big name, people know her. You kind of want her face and her name on all the stuff so that people will come see the movie. But also, it's like, she doesn't show up until the last 20 or so minutes. I think you're maybe shooting yourselves in the foot by putting her everywhere, you know?
I don't really agree with that. I mean, I do, but I don't agree with, like, them, like, shooting themselves in the foot, per se. Like, marketing...
Yeah, that's not the right phrase.
Marketing is a tough thing. You gotta do what you gotta do to get the butts in the seats and them to watch the movie. Like, the marketing of the movie and the movie itself are, obviously two very different things. A terrible movie can, be made to look great, and a great movie can be made to look terrible with a trailer.
Be made to it's about telemarketing when really it's about mutant forces.
But yeah, I mean, I don't blame them at all for putting Michelle Pfeiffer everywhere.
Yeah,
like, I guarantee
made an
you.
assumption.
I guarantee you, if they made that some big secret, didn't put her on any posters, didn't put her in the trailer, the movie doesn't make nearly as much as it does. I don't know by how much, but like, she's instrumental in putting butts in seats for this movie. Like,
Yeah.
there's no question about that.
Yeah, it's not like I needed her involvement to be a secret. Like, I didn't need it to be like, oh man, we didn't even know Michelle Pfeiffer was in this movie until it came out. It's just that the way that she's marketed, it makes you feel like, because, again, like the first movie, Scott and Hope and Hank are the three main characters. Like, the three of them together carry the whole movie. We kind of advertise her like she's one of them, and so I go into the movie expecting her to be a main character, and again, she doesn't show up until near the end. So
Well,
I
sure,
made
but I mean,
that like Captain Logan made, and I'm glad I watched his how he felt about before I went in because he mentioned this, where he figured that them getting her out would happen like middle of the movie, and then he was surprised when the entire movie was about that.
um, yeah, I don't blame them for false marketing, especially because people complain so hard with like spoilers, like you're showing too much in the trailers. I feel like I've already seen the movie. So when like Infinity War did the thing of like showing you shots that are just not in the movie, or digitally removing stones that Thanos is going to have in the scene on Titan. Like no one's complaining about that false marketing.
Yeah,
But
it don't sound like it's the movie's fault, or even that I'm like mad about it or bothered over it, but it's just, it's not what I would have done. I would have like had her in the marketing just so that people know Michelle Pfeiffer's in the movie, and like maybe give her some interviews so that people who like pay attention that sort of thing will go, oh hey, Michelle Pfeiffer's like a major role in this movie. But I don't know, like I feel like something gave me the impression that like, okay, she would be part of the cast for this movie for a significant portion of it, and she's just not.
that's fair. Anything else you want to talk about? I feel like we've more or less covered the gambit here.
Well, we didn't talk any. Well, we hardly mentioned Bill Foster, Lawrence Fishburne, who I think gave a pretty good performance. And we didn't talk about Walton Goggins, who's the secondary villain, Sonny Birch, the gangster guy.
Yeah, he keeps getting typecast as generic bad guy in movies, and I don't like that. He's a better actor than that.
Yeah.
He,
Like, just watching this movie, you could tell this guy could be playing a more compelling character, but at the same time, I don't dislike him. Someone, I think it was in Collider, made the mention that like the sort of role he has is like a smarmy, kind of funny black market arms dealer. You could have just brought the character of Justin Hammer back, and he could have served the same purpose, and I would have been fine with that because I want that character to show up in these movies again. But you know, for his own guy, I don't think it's a bad performance. I don't think it's a bad role. He's funny when he has to be funny. You know, he serves his purpose, and he's mainly there to give Luis and his two guys stuff to do, and they're funny. So, you know.
yeah, I really like Lawrence Fishburne in the movie. I'm glad we didn't kill him, and that he can potentially come back. And yeah, I bringing back characters that we haven't seen in a while is a thing that I wish the MCU would really start doing. Like, we didn't kill Abomination, bring him back. Why not? Hell,
And, like,
flesh him out.
especially Justin Hammer, because we keep bringing up his tech in Luke Cage, and so I'm like, why are we not taking advantage of this? Why don't we have, like, the guy who gives weapons to supervillains?
I don't know. Maybe they don't feel the need to do that because we have the Tinker now. But even then, I don't know how much it's going to be used in future movies. So we'll see. But yeah, I just like we finally brought back Ross for Civil War, and that was great. Like just keep doing that. Like find a way to bring back Zemo, have him get out of prison or something.
Although I'm not entirely sure what his motivation would be if he's gonna keep doing stuff, but I agree I want to see him again. But like, I don't know, we can do stuff with these guys.
Yeah.
And like, I'm gonna be really disappointed. Like, I know, like, Ghost didn't resonate with you as much as she did with me, but I'm gonna be really disappointed if she doesn't come back at some point, just because, like, she's got this really cool power, and she's kind of in a complex place at the end. It's like, unless I'm misremembering anything, I think she's the first villain we've had in any of these movies who just does not kill anyone. Like, at the end, she says, she tells Bill to leave her behind because she's hurt people, and looking back, I don't think she's killed anyone, so it's a really interesting kind of like, maybe she can be a good guy now place, and like, she's kind of like Valkyrie, like...
I don't think...
I was disappointed
It's funny because...
we didn't get any Valkyrie in Infinity Wars, because that's a really cool, like, support we had.
And it's funny because when she had her fist through Hank Pym's throat, I thought we were going to do the X-Men 3 thing, just kill him off, like right there in the movie.
That would be terrible.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't do that. And she seems really hell-bent on, like, killing people if she needs to get what she wants. But yeah, you're right. I don't think we actually see her kill anyone on screen.
Yeah. So it's like, and some people even go as far as to say, like, they don't consider her the villain of the movie. And I wouldn't quite go that far. Like, she is the antagonist. 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 Like, she is the antagonist.